Well, first, thank you for coming. I'm really happy to talk about this book, and I'm really happy to see faces that I know and faces that are new to me. I am coming from my kitchen in Billings, Montana. Uh, the work happens down in my basement office, but the lighting is more photogenic here, and I need all the help I can get. So it is. Um, and strangely, I'm reminded of a line from a Pernice Brothers song, which goes, "We'll play to 6 the way we play to 10." So here we go. And it will be a beautiful life. It came out in early June, I think. The supply chain issues and all of that made finding a publication date, a little like throwing a dart at a board, but we got it out, and I've been very happy with the book itself and the response to it. It's my 10th book, and they don't get easier. Unlike, I just made this observation to Lou, unlike almost anything else I could do, I would, if I did it more often, I'd get better at it. But writing books, it seems like it's harder and harder the more I do it. So I'll tell you a little bit about sort of how this book came to be, what the idea was, and then I'm hoping we can just have a nice exchange about the book. Any questions you've got, I'm happy to answer. Almost anything is fair game. Cowboys are doing well, so I'm happy to talk about them as well. If you want to go a little off topic, we won't talk about the Giants right now.
They don't listen.
Yeah, well, what's to say? Yeah. Anyway, the idea for the book, I need to back up a few years. My wife and I moved from Montana to Maine in early or late spring of 2018. And I started writing this book soon thereafter, and it just kind of died on the tracks, maybe 30 or 35,000 words into it. I mean, I just really didn't know what I was going to do. And this is what I talked about earlier, the fact that this just gets harder each new book I try to write. So I set it down, and Maine didn't work out for us for any number of reasons. We came back home to Montana. We had not sold our house, which we now call the best thing that never happened, because we were able to just come back to Montana and move back more or less into our old life, although we moved in the middle of a pandemic. So, everything was different, as it remains. And soon thereafter, for whatever reason, I took another look at the manuscript and thought, okay, I see it now. I see where we're going with this. And that's about the time that Lou and I started talking. And he got a look at the partial, maybe when I was another 15 or 20,000 words down the line. But still, I don't think I was more than half finished at that point. And luckily for me, he saw it too, and we rode that horse until it was busted. The idea, Larry Watson, the guy who wrote Let Him Go, which is now all over the cable channels, said something really wise that when I saw that he had said it, I kind of hit myself in the head and go, that's it. That's exactly it. He said that all of his fiction comes from memory. They start with memory, and then imagination transforms the memory into something that's useful for fiction. And so Max, the main character in the novel, is what's known in the industry as the oil and gas industry as a pig tracker. He follows tools through pipelines from one place to another. And that is some work that I have done in my life and continue to do on a very occasional basis. And so that's the memory part. But everything else about Max, who he is, what his family situation is, his sardonic sense of humor, it's all imagined. It's not like I was being a stenographer of my own life. I mean, if I had simply transcribed what I do on the pipeline, it would have been the most boring novel ever, because I travel and I follow the tool and I go home and I kiss my wife and the end. So so that was the fun part, was taking this thing that I knew that sort of inspired the spark of an idea, and then applying imagination to every other part of it in order to get this story that we ended up with. And I'm really pleased with what it came out as being. And I rarely see the end. Sometimes I see the end, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. And sometimes I see only the beginning, but I rarely see the whole and then try to write that. It's the process of writing reveals the whole. And that was certainly the case here. I mean, I just didn't, there was a point at which Lou said, I don't know where this goes. And there ended up being 25,000 words that were still lying out there. But it did. Thank God it went. So yeah, that is it. So I'm really, I know we've got some discussion questions, and I really want to hear what people think about those, but I'd also love to just talk back and forth about the book if folks have things they want to talk about. Anyone?
Well, I'll offer an observation.
Sure.
I'm fairly certain, Craig, that I have read all of your novels.
Thank you.
I've even narrated a couple of them, and I rank this right up there with Julep Street as my favorites of yours. And what I find interesting as a commonality between the two of those books is they both start with the hero getting the rug pulled out from under him.
Right.
And then you go on from there and see how he puts his life back together or creates a new version of that life. And I just think that's an interesting way to develop the story arc. It's like, let's make the horrible, unexpected thing hit this character right in the opening pages, whether it was Carson losing his newspaper in Julep Street, or Max being hit with the divorce, and not knowing what that means to him for his family and his sense of who he is, why he is. I thought that parallel was interesting, and I wondered if that was a structure that you used intentionally.
Intention is always hard for me to suss out, because I come to things more with an idea than some sort of intent about where I'm headed. But I think it's interesting that you pointed that out, because Lou, you might recall one of our earliest conversations was you're saying, I've looked at your books and I think you write crossroads,
Yep.
Which is another way of saying, what you said, David. That is just where, when Max had pestered me enough that I was willing to sit down and write him, that's where he was. He was wandering through an airport with the last flight home gone and his wife ticked off at him, justifiably, because she's not looking at the one flight, she's looking at the history. And, you know, and that's just where he came to me. And so that's where I picked it up. And then almost everything else was, oh, and now this guy has wandered onto the screen, and oh, now he's got this problem. And, you know, and part of that is just what I consider to be dynamic storytelling. I get bored with stories that say, and then, because they seem really passive to me. I like stories that say this, but therefore this, you know, because the tension ratchets up a little bit more, the stakes become higher, even if they're just emotional stakes. You know, it doesn't always have to be the tangible things you lose. You know, sometimes it's just losing your connection with your humanity or your sense of who you are. So that is at play. The other thing that's at play is something else I've thought about a lot, and that is, I like stories that begin almost as close to the end as possible, you know, because that allows you to leave out, or not leave out, but everything that led up to there, you can pull in through other ways, you know, but you start it there and then you're at a flashpoint, and then forward it goes, I hope, you know. I mean, there are a lot of backward looks in this book, but it's as he's moving through things. You know, I love that he thinks of his mother while he's sitting in a tub in a hotel room in Detroit. Like and he has this whole series of things. He thinks about Johnny Appleseed, you know, and then he's off on these memories of his mother, with whom he had a completely different experience or relationship than he did other people in his life. So.
I'm thinking of three particular incidents in the book where Max really surprised me.
Yeah.
I mean, because we have a sense of who he is, and he's just this hardworking guy who's got to me at least, a very exotic job, and loves his daughter, and pays his share of their expenses, although his wife is out earning him, whatever. But there were the three I'm thinking of off the top of my head, which each one took me hugely by surprise. The first is when he's dancing naked which that was just a funny moment. But the second one, which I think really, really shocked me, was the bowling ball incident.
Yes.
And the third is when he lets his young colleagues sleep in the bed with him. I'm wondering if you can talk about those three particular moments.
I think you've got them pegged just about right. I mean, certainly the dancing naked was just, you know, that's, I don't know how much you want to know about me, but one of the things that I'll do to amuse my wife is I'll do interpretive dance to communicate some idea to her. And I do it clothed because, you know, I'm not into crimes against humanity. But the point is that, you know, is that I'll wiggle across the room and I'll, you know, make up a song and all this. And, you know, and so it was just kind of a moment of whimsy. I could really picture him coming upstairs. He's got all his stuff in the wash because, you know, Max's wife is not going to do that anymore. And, you know, and he's thinking about this interesting dude that he came across on the floor of the terminal in Minneapolis. And he just, you know, jumps on the landing and does a moonwalk, and there they are standing there. You know, humor is a funny thing because yeah, that's almost a Yogi Berra-ism. But there's so many books that are kind of in the area where I write, where I'm left to wonder, like, do these people never laugh? Is there never mirth? Is there never silliness? Because I just, it's hard for me to picture life without it, you know? And so I always end up going down a few humorous trails, just because, if you're writing about life, well, part of life is silly and absurd, and it's nice to capture that where you can. The bowling ball. All right. Well, I think the book as a whole does tend to pull back the curtain occasionally on Max's rage, and I think at the moment that he sends the two bowling balls through the glass slider is the only moment in that whole sequence where he would have given in to that. Had he waited another moment, he probably would have carried them upstairs and put them on the truck with everything else. And he didn't. He let it go. And I think his wife's reaction to that is very telling, because if you have a marriage where there's been sort of some fundamental break in it and people are angry that it's come to this, that's a moment where it could have just escalated, and her response to it was almost like, are you okay now? Did you get it out? Because she's not available for it anymore. And, I've heard from, it's funny that these people have been uniformly guys. I've heard from some guys who don't like the wife, and I like the wife a great deal. I really like her. Partly because, she's long since had enough, and yet she's willing to let him go in a way that gives him the best chance to sort of find his feet and keep going. I really like Janine. I don't understand people who don't like her, and like I said, it's been men who have had that criticism. The women I've heard from have been like, oh yeah, I know where Janine's coming from, and so that's meant a lot to me. And finally, the coworker, the chaste relationship with the coworker. So I had, besides Lou, I had another friend who was kind of reading this as it was going along, and I sent him the chapter just where they go to bed, where nothing else has happened yet, and he like screamed at me. He was like, he goes, they don't want us. These young women don't want us. And he's thinking about, like, seems like in every Philip Roth novel, there's some moment where a pretty undergrad, does something completely, titillating to the aging male protagonist. And my friend saw that coming, like, they don't want us, it's our fantasy that they want us, but they don't, and I said, relax, I don't think I'm headed in that direction. But there had to be something about Alicia that revealed to him in some way the part of his relationship that he had dropped with his daughter, and I just don't think he saw her as, as a sexual being. I think he saw her as, somebody that he could protect in the way that he could without overstepping her boundaries and, interfering with her ability to negotiate her own way through it. And that was instructive for him, because he, somewhere in all of that, he needed to figure out that his daughter was not this little girl that he had kept her as for a while. He was kind of bewildered by Alexandra. So that was what was happening there. Plus it created this great tension that played out in other ways. I mean, he did end up hurting her the way, lovers can hurt each other, and she called him on it. That scene where she will not let him off the hook about what he did was one of my favorite to write. So
it was just, I think it was particularly risky in the era of, Me Too.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I thought, oh, is he really going to risk so much? And
Yeah.
he did it with a very, I never sensed he had any particular lust for her. It was a very protective moment. She
Yeah.
had a need, and she didn't need him for sex, but she needed some security and reassurance and companionship at that
Yeah.
moment. But oh gosh, my head almost exploded. So,
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad it
what
didn't.
you're walking into here,
Yeah.
lawsuits, arrests, all kinds of things. So it was a scary moment for me, seriously.
Well, it wasn't purposeful misdirection, but I'm glad that was your reaction coming into it, because the way it unravels in a different way is, that was interesting. Yeah. But I never, I wasn't altogether certain what was going to come next, but I never saw that as anything that was going to go in that direction. I don't think that's where Max is. Plus, he needs the nurse who, that all comes later. But yeah.
Well, I think there were two things that came out of that I think is worth discussing. One is that the notion of portraying a male-female relationship as intimate in a way that casual sex could never be.
Right.
Something that absolutely happened and therefore became more painful because of it.
Right.
And the other thing that you and I have discussed, but I would love to have you share it with the with the group. This whole notion of fathers accepting their daughters as adults, which is one of the big challenges of fatherhood. I think, I'm sure it's true of motherhood too, but I have no experience with that. But the idea that there comes a point, and it's often long after it should be, when a father has to say, she's not only a responsible human being, she's probably more together than I am in most cases. And I have no choice but to let her live her life. And I think those two things, they kept sort of weaving between each other with the two characters. And I thought that was a fascinating way to approach it.
Yeah, I'm looking at my friend David Odie because he has daughters, and I don't have any children that aren't canine. But what I found, and it's funny, I had to write the book to see this. I always kind of look askance at somebody who has a theme before they write the book, because I have to write the book in order to know what the theme was. My feeling is that those things are inside us, and they come out in the doing of the work. But there are mirrors all over that book. There's Alexandra and Alicia are looking at each other in a mirror through Max, because they're not at all similar, but they have similar issues, and they present perspectives that allow Max to figure some things out. There is Big Bonk and his father. There is Little Bonk, mirroring in many ways Max, without, Max doesn't have the infidelity, but he was the young guy on the crew who, and he's now the old man. And then it seems like Charles, the character of Charles, mirrors everything. This is a guy with enough perspective on things to sort of say, look at yourself now, Max, and how about now? And what do you think of this? And so that's kind of what I realized the book was, but it took writing the thing and doing another draft before, okay. I was trying to do something, and there it is. So, which to me is the most fun part of the entire thing is figuring out what I wanted to say by saying it, as opposed to figuring out what I want to say and then attempting to say it. So, yeah. And I think that's why I was able to write a father not being a father myself, is I achieved some degree of empathy with Max and was able to step inside and anticipate how he would react to things and what different interactions, how he would process those things.
So I'm sorry, just one quick question. I don't want to dominate things here, but it was obviously then a deliberate decision on your part to make Alexandra and Alicia's names so similar, because that sort of leaped out at me too.
I don't think it was deliberate, but now that I say them, I go, oh yeah, that was probably going on too. Because I think had I thought of it, I would have said, nah, one of these needs to be Kendra, or whatever. So, yeah. Lynn?
Yeah, I had two things I wanted to talk about, having to do with Max's realization of what's going on around him. Sometimes it seems like he's not really sure what's happening. And for instance, with the divorce, you mentioned several times that it's not a big, it's not really surprising to him. He should have known this years ago, and things were, and the narrator doesn't actually say this, but you sort of get the feeling the narrator is telling you, yes, this has happened many times before, where he's just not there for Janine, and she's getting more and more pissed off by it, and Max doesn't seem to see that. And I got my cat.
Yeah.
This is Sheffield.
Oh, what a beautiful cat.
Yes, he's named for one of the streets by Wrigley Field. The other cat is Waveland and Sheffield.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Anyway, but I was going to say that Max doesn't seem to get it at some point. That this divorce is coming, even so. And I was wondering if that was intentional on your part, or I'm not sure what it was you were trying to say about him.
I'm not sure that I had anything intentional to say about him. I imagined him as being a certain way, and one of those things is that he's, at least at the outset of the book, he's pretty heavily siloed. He goes on a job, he comes home, he waits for the next job, and he goes. And for a long time now, home has been kind of churning along, and it's only when the hits start coming that he starts putting it together in retrospect. Like he knows, you might recall in the scene where Janine shows up to dinner to tell him she wants the divorce, he knows it before she says it, so it's almost like the pieces have been moving together in the background, and and at the moment where they're all going to slide into place and lock, he goes, hey, this has been happening, this is kind of, I don't know why I just thought of this, but I'll give you a sort of an example. When I was adopted at birth, and I now know my birth mother, and she began to show when she was pregnant with me over the summer. She was between her junior and senior years of college, and she began to show. And when I met her for the first time, and we talked about all these things, she said, what I did in response to that was I just pretended it wasn't happening until, and then for a while, everybody else pretended that it wasn't happening, even though it was obvious, until finally the family had to sit down and have a, so what's going on here? And everybody knew it, And I think in many ways, that's the way life is arriving at Max's doorstep is, he knows what's going on, and it's easier to imagine that it's not until it is. And,
Right.
and that's I think that's a very human thing. It's probably also a very guy thing. I can't say for sure because I'm just a guy, and I can't necessarily balance the perspective, but knowing myself and knowing my guy friends, we seem to pull that maneuver with, some regularity of, what is this? And it's like, come on, man, you can't be that dumb. It's been happening, it's all been in prelude for a while, and here it is. So.
Well, the second part of my question also has to do with his self-awareness, and
Right.
it's about the heart attack. You've been reading all along about his just woeful eating habits. I mean, it's
Right.
unbelievable. I mean, he says sometimes at one point he goes somewhere and he gets 2 Big Macs and, and then food on top of that. And I mean, when you think of the calorie count, it's just, oh my God.
Yeah.
And, I was thinking, he's been told by his son-in-law, who he can't stand, that he's eating badly. And I can understand that you don't want somebody telling you what to eat. But I mean, somewhere along the line, he must have known that he wasn't eating a healthful diet, and he wasn't exercising, and he wasn't. He what did he say? He passed the workout room in the hotel.
On his way to get a cookie, yeah.
On the way to get a cookie, exactly.
Yeah.
So he's got to know that he was he was up there as a candidate for a heart attack, and yet when it hits him, it's like, oh my God, what happened to him? So once again, I mean, what is this telling us about Max?
Telling us that Max is, moved moment to moment and hasn't projected out the fact that he's going to get older and get at higher risk. And, I mean, I don't know. It's knew a guy once who never changed the oil in his car, because it didn't present an issue until he threw a rod through the oil pan, and then he had a big issue. And, Max's heart attack is, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that was probably the part of the book where I knew the least about, like, what would this look like and how would this go? And I have a friend, I think, David, you probably know the Bentlers, Cece and Jim. And Jim is a emergency room doctor. So I got him on the phone one day and I was like, okay, walk me through this, And he said, well, it's all in timing, it's all in.
Unknown caller.
He said, it's all in timing, how quickly do they get to him? How fast is he here? How quickly can they get the stent into him? And so then it was, okay, all right, well, this will work because, he's just a few miles out of town. She's driving up. So she sees him go down. She's quick with the phone call. They're in the air, and logistically it all worked out. And so then, I'm talking to Jim Bentler and I'm saying, so how long is he in the hospital? One night, maybe 2. Really? That's it? And it's like, hey, if he's still alive after it happens, it's smooth sailing after that. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm 51 years old, so maybe I haven't delved into the intricacies of modern cardiac care, but it was just stunning to me that it was basically slip in a stent, give him some anticoagulants, and go on your way, bud. I love the doctor's conversation with him where he's like, okay, well, so I'm plugged up, and the doctor's like, no, you were plugged up, and we have fixed that, and so it was literally and figuratively a new a new chance for him, you know. So, but he still ate the spaghetti carbonara a few days later. So Max didn't completely disappear on us. So.
You know, those are good points. And I got his junk food eating because when people are traveling around and living in motels, we tend to eat a lot less healthily than when we're at home. But it's also kind of his, you know, he lives two lives, and his life on the road is a bit more significant to him than his life back home, which is probably why his Janine divorced him.
Yeah.
So, but that's just part of that whole thing. But, you know, I was fascinated by what Lynn was saying earlier about, you know, his inability to grasp the obvious right away. And I was intrigued by the way you started all your chapters with the calculations. I mean, when I first started reading this book, I thought it might be a story about someone on the spectrum or something. You know, maybe he had Asperger's, you know, because he was so, that seemed to be where his brain worked the most efficiently, is calculating exactly where the pig was, or exactly how long it was going to take him to fly from point A to point B, or when, and people who really focus on that sometimes don't focus as much on the nuances of human behavior. That was what I got out of it anyway. And I thought that was, I wonder if you want to talk a little about that choice to put those calculations in.
Yeah, well, I've already written the Asperger book. So what I think the mathematics of the deal represented to Max is, you know, here is certainty, you know. I mean, he's so calm in the moments where any of us would be freaking out, you know, when they lose touch with the pig, or you know, how long is this going to take? And, you know, I love the scene that he's thinking about in the rear view with his daughter, and he's telling her, look, sweetie, if you've got, all you need are two of the three numbers and you can find the third, and it doesn't matter which two you have. And he's talking to her about that certainty, which, and the part where Max is dumb is he doesn't realize that she has taken that principle and said in her own life, if I save money at this rate, you know, for this amount of time, I'm going to be where I want to be. You know, I mean, she is her father's daughter, and, you know, and he views her as this somewhat exotic being, you know, like, how in the world did she end up like this? Well, you know, you had a lot to do with it. Yeah. So yeah, I like that aspect of it. And it's one of the aspects that I like of that kind of work, which is why I continue to do it. I just did that first pipeline job that Alicia is on. I just did that line 2 weeks ago in Buffalo, New York. And part of the reason I do it is, you know, if you launch the thing at this speed, it'll be here at this time, and you can almost set your watch by it. You know, there are some variables that have to do with pass through of the product as the tool's moving down the line and stuff, but mostly it's, you know, wait for it. You know, there it is. So few things in life kind of go that way. So, and he's obviously clung to that.
Did you want me to ask some of those book club questions?
You can, yeah, that would be great. I'd love to hear the answers.
Yeah, same. I'm really interested. So this is for anyone who wants to answer. What did you make of Max Flint when you first met him? Like, did you consider him a sympathetic character or not?
Well, I'll say I didn't like him.
Yeah.
It took me a long time. In fact, I was close to dropping the book.
Wow.
If it wasn't for the pediatrician, I wouldn't have read it. That was he was the character that hooked me into the book to begin with. Max, I just wanted to say, get on with it.
Right.
Come on, this isn't rocket science here. So that as things started to happen and his life really started to take a downward spiral, then he got much more interesting to me.
Yeah.
I will disagree slightly. At the beginning when he's having trouble missing his flight and everything, I felt very sympathetic to him. I guess I've had enough bad experiences in airports to think, why is his wife chewing him out over something that's beyond his control? And later, my sympathy for him fell and my sympathy for Janine rose when I, got to realize, oh, this is a chronic situation. It's not just a one-time thing. My husband was once out of town and we had a serious health crisis with our son, and he just dropped what he was doing, and he would have killed people to get on the next plane to get home because it was that important. So I did, and the more I got to know Janine, the more sympathetic I was to what she had been putting up with. But at the very beginning, I thought, hey, shit happens, lighten up, lady, I'm sure he tried his best. Wasn't his fault. But anyway, so it's interesting. Our levels of sympathy, we're in opposition, I guess. So.
I kind of go along with Annalise a little bit. I don't think I was at risk of putting the book down because I knew there would be a payoff. But I remember I started into it, and my wife asked me, because she knew I'd been anticipating getting my hands on it. My wife said, so, what do you think of it so far? And I remember saying something like, well, it's starting out with one of Craig's, angsty characters that I can't quite relate to yet. But I know something interesting is going to happen to him. and having been in that road warrior phase myself until, a year and a half ago. And I think, Craig, I'm fairly sure you and I have passed at least once at the MSP airport.
I have no doubt. Yeah.
It drew me in, the setting drew me in, just like your settings and billings draw me in. And I thought, okay, I know this is going to be going somewhere interesting, but I didn't immediately love Max.
Yeah.
It was worth seeing where it went.
Yeah, I was definitely in the same boat with that one. Charles really caught my attention though. And I felt like every time that I was reading a letter from Charles, even though we didn't physically see him in the book as much, just hearing what he had to say, he was trying to teach Max, he was teaching everyone that was reading the book really while the process was going. And a lot of the times I would be like, wow, I never thought about it that way. And it was really eye-opening of a perspective.
Well, I know Lou and I had conversations about this. Like, you don't have to. Our calculation, to the extent that there was any calculation, was, they don't have to love him immediately, but they got to hang in there with him, and that's the trick, and
Yeah, it's one of the real challenges for a writer, because
Yeah.
if you want to write about a troubled person, you have to show that person as a troubled person.
Yeah. Oh, they're so much more interesting than non-troubled people. I remember, I write a lot of lacking fathers in my fiction from all directions. And I remember one time that my mother asked me, well, why don't you write, why aren't women front and center more in your stories? And I think as I've evolved, that they have taken more of a center stage. I would say that Alexandra and Alicia and are pretty upfront in this book. But I told my mother, who I'm sure I glorify her a little bit, but she has earned it. I said, well, you're pretty great. You didn't really give me anything to work with. whereas my dad has, given me a lifetime of fictional fodder. And so there's that. And then there's also the thing, and I think this is really true. And I know David and I have talked about this, and I know Lou, you and I have talked about this. Men are in a lot of trouble. And a lot of it is self-inflicted, but they are in a lot of trouble because we sort of give men this message of, produce. Your feelings don't really matter. Deal with it. Suck it up. Whatever. And we shouldn't be surprised that we end up with a lot of deeply damaged people in positions where they can inflict damage on others. I mean, we've seen that writ large in all kinds of ways over the last 5 years in particular, but much longer than that. I mean, it's so, so if I can write from a perspective of, damaged man who is stumbling toward the light, that feels like a familiar place for me, because I have been that damaged man stumbling toward the light, and I'm fully capable of being that damaged man stumbling toward the light later today, if I've got some time. So, yeah.
I think another good question from the list to ask would probably be, why does everyone think that Charles initially reached out to Max? Like, what do you think he saw in Max that prompted him to cultivate a friendship?
I almost think that there's something in Charles, from having been a pediatrician, and he sees people and wants to fix them. And I think he saw something in Max that needed fixing. I think he saw him at first as a project, and then later came to see him as a friend.
I really like Charles as a character. I will start there. I think also sometimes when I was once at a bizarre conference that I knew absolutely nobody at, and there was one other woman who was there who also knew absolutely no one, and we immediately hit it off, and we became BFFs for the duration of that conference. We had meals together, we confided in each other, we drank wine late into the night together, and then the conference ended and I never was in touch with her ever again. But I think sometimes when two people are in extremis, as it were, they're in a difficult situation and there's nobody else around, they will immediately connect. What I think was interesting here was that the connection remained, it lasted. That was, I think, what made it unusual.
I got the
Definitely.
feeling that Charles reached out to everybody that he was in touch with, and that for some reason Max relating back to him is what caused the friendship to start. And I too thought that Charles was a really wonderful character, and really he started to grab me. I mean, it was a certain point where I couldn't wait to get another letter from Charles.
Neither could I. Yeah. I view Charles. I mean, what I think is a lot less important than what somebody who reads the book thinks. But I came to view Charles as the connective tissue of pretty much everything. He had his own story that slowly came out. I think when you find out at the end what's about to happen to Charles, suddenly in retrospect, you start to have at least some more plausible explanations for why he was the way he was in earlier parts of the book. I know that's something we did, third draft, fourth draft, where we're like, okay, there's some parts in this book where we just need Charles to talk a little more urgently about time, so that when we drop this, people aren't saying, oh God, well, here's a plot device, no, it wasn't. So there were some parts where we went back and Charles was a little more insistent about how they didn't have a lot of time here and they needed to talk. And so that was fun. Yeah. I don't reread my stuff very much, but obviously in the production of a book, you have to read it again and again and again, to the point that, when you get the artifact, you admire the beauty of having it in your hands, and then you immediately have the moment of, God, I'm so sick of this. But the end with Charles, I would read that and I would just get emotional every time I read it. So, which is either self-indulgent or a good sign. I'll take it as the good sign, and save the self-indulgence for something else.
All right. Does anyone have any other final comments or questions or anything? All right. This was wonderful.
I'll just say,
Yep.
as a father of daughters, and knowing, Craig, that you don't have children, I was very impressed with the way you wrote that relationship.
Agreed.
Um,
Agreed.
And I was trying not to judge it by any of the relationships I have with my three daughters, because they're three completely different individuals. I see aspects of me in all of them, aspects I like and aspects I don't like.
Yeah.
And I won't trouble you with tales of me trying to teach my youngest daughter math when we changed schools from Colorado to Montana, and all of a sudden they were teaching it a completely different way. Thank God for our friend who was a retired math teacher who could connect with her in the way her father couldn't. But I really do admire that. I admire that relationship and the ring of truth that it has to it. I got the book, read the book, and then almost immediately Susan and I left on a road trip that took us through most of July, including up to Montana. And while I was on that trip, I read a couple of other books that I took out of the library, and I want to go back and reread about Max. I really do. And this time I think maybe I'll go ahead and write that review that was running around in my head that I never set down. Because I especially talking about it today, I think it's worth refreshing my memory. And not only that, I think that reading those letters and knowing now what we learned at the end about Charles is going to put them in a different light. So I'm going to do something I almost never do. I'm planning to reread it.
Oh, great. Well, we'll be especially happy to get that review. I'm checking it from time to time. Once we hit 50, the algorithms change, and that'll be a good thing. I hate having my life ruled in some measure by algorithms, but there you go. So I have this weird message of, get the book at your friendly neighborhood bookstore that needs your business, but be sure to write that Amazon review so we can, so we can reap the rewards of that. So thank you, David. It means a lot to me coming from you. So.
Thank you so much, Craig. This has been great.
Yeah. This has been very fun. It's nice to meet Annalise, Barbara. Now I'll think you. Should I think of you as Barbara and read you as Judith? Okay, great. And Lynn, thank you so much. I hope you have a good meeting in 1 minute.
Good to see you.
Thanks,
Craig.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye, thanks.
Bye-bye.